This is the European edition of Breaking Banks, the world's #1 FinTech podcast and radio show. We bring you the European unicorns, startups, founders, regulators, and leaders innovating the rapidly evolving FinTech scene today. A truly localized podcast with both English and local language content, with some of the world's most well-known hosts and influencers in the FinTech sector globally. Join us every week as we explore what makes the European Union a phenomenal proving ground for many of the fastest growing FinTech plays in the world today. Okay, let's roll.
Hello, and welcome to episode number 63 of Breaking Banks Europe. Today we're going to be talking to our guests about their FinTech journeys through India. India is a thriving FinTech ecosystem, and there are lots of great stories coming out of India. So with me, I have Lizzie Chapman, who is the CEO of Zest Money, and I have Amit, who is the founder of MEDICI Ventures. Is that correct?
MEDICI Global, actually.
MEDICI Global Ventures. Okay, I must say global. Right. That's very important. So thank you so much, guys, and welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Okay, so the show is really about hearing your stories and how you've seen the FinTech ecosystem in India evolve. Lizzie, how long have you lived in India?
Yeah, so it's been about 9 years, amazingly. But even before that, I spent a few years flying in and out as an investor, an evil VC type investor, trying to find FinTech investments. So yeah, it's been more than a decade and a lot has happened.
Yes. So what took you to India? I would love to hear your story. Sure, you were investing. They didn't call it FinTech back then, right? 10 years ago?
Actually, no, that's true. We were like part of that whole software is eating the world. Software will eat financial services. That was my thesis at that time. And I was also fascinated by financial inclusion and making a social impact. So I, at that time, invested mostly in gold lending companies, microfinance companies, and kind of whatever we could find that, fit that theme. But yeah, I fell in love. I fell in love with the opportunity and the opportunity to kind of change the world in a small way, which was obviously going to happen. And made lots of predictions at that time that, in 10 years, 1 billion people will be using mobile phones and doing things on an app. And yeah, we're nearly there, sort of playing out. So,
yes.
It wasn't too crazy.
But why would you leave the charmed life of a venture capitalist, where you get to see all the entrepreneurs struggle and work really hard? Just give the sign checks. I mean, at least that's the theory, right? And actually jump into doing it yourself.
Yeah, I don't know. I must have been mad. Actually, I met a very, very enigmatic and passionate founder in London, a guy called Errol Damelin, who was the founder of Wonga, which was kind of storming the world in a very dramatic way at that time.
This is the payday lending
said, I'm going to take over the world. Yes, exactly. But at that time, we didn't call it that. We called it, change the world, FinTech. And he said, I want to take over the world one country at a time. I think India's next. India's ripe for FinTech disruption. So I actually joined him. I packed my bags, moved to Mumbai, and became their representative in India, which was kind of crazy at that time. I'd say to people in hindsight, being a bit naive maybe is an advantage as an entrepreneur, especially if you're going to move to a completely different country where you don't understand anything. Having a bit of naivety makes it possible, right? So we would have these really funny meetings where I'd go and meet lawyers and say, right, I'm going to start a digital lending business this year, and they just laugh you out of the room because it was just completely insane to imagine that a decade ago. But really, really, really good experience, and still here. So it didn't put me off.
Right. So I think we'll have a lot of questions about that, about your story. That seems fascinating. Amit, what's your story? Medici, huh? I mean, that's an Italian banker. What are we doing in India?
Yeah. No, so we are a US headquartered company, and the story is like this. me and my other co-founder, Aditya lives in Princeton, in New Jersey. He was one of the founders of Money 2020. He saw the power of sort of new fintech companies building new financial services experiences on the US side. I came from the consulting research world. This is my second venture. In the previous venture, I was actually doing a lot of work with large financial services companies. And I actually was very interested in talking to the founders who were starting these new fintech companies. And this was like 2012. So it was not called fintech. And
no, exactly.
Yeah, there was.
What was it called though?
I think the conference guys used to use the word money a lot. So there was Money 2020, and there was this and that, and then payment for pay. There was a Pay 360. There was a Pay.
That's right. That's not changed, right? Yeah.
So we basically wanted to build a Bloomberg of fintech, essentially a way to track all the thousands of companies across the world in financial technology space, right from stealth mode all the way to large companies, and build profiles which are like much more detailed and very, very useful for banks, for partnerships, and for investors, for investments. So that's what we were set out to build. Accidentally, both Aditya and me were very sort of interested in writing, so we started a blog as well on the side. And then what happened is the blog actually became much more popular than our product itself, the platform. And so we are like the elephant in the six blind men now. So people think, people who just read our articles, they think we are a media company. People who see our research reports, they feel that we are like the McKinsey or whatever, fintech. And then people who actually sort of subscribe and take membership and see our platform, they know like the full power of what we do.
Right. So you're doing a combination of things, right? You're doing media work, you're doing ecosystem building, you're sort of, I'm sure, educating the community. You're also an active venture investor, aren't you?
Personally, I do help a lot of fintech startups in sort of, either in an advisory role or putting a small check or helping them raise money. At Medici, as a company, we basically have two business lines. One is a membership for the enterprises, banks, FIs, technology companies. And then there is a individual membership, which is like sort of economist for fintech.
I see. So that's more research, media, education, advocacy, all of that. That's awesome. So, Lizzie, going back to your story, how did you end up starting Zest Money? Where did the idea come from, and what made you take the jump?
Yeah, so actually when we were at Wonga, myself and my two co-founders now, we were all working there. They were based in London, I was based in Mumbai, and we spent an enormous amount of time trying to design what we thought would be the perfect product for the India consumer. And we had the luxury of being part of a larger company. So we had, resources, we could do market research, we could quiz taxi drivers about exactly what they needed in their life. And we invented this product called Pay Later. I'm so annoyed we didn't keep the trademark.
Buy now, pay later.
Pay later. You've heard this one, right? But we literally, we actually applied for the trademark for that word in 2012. And so we thought this is the killer product for India. This is the right product. We were going to obviously launch it as part of Wonga, and then the rest is history. We'll save that for another day. But we three were so convinced of this idea because we'd spent so much time, studying the market, testing this concept, and even talking to e-commerce players, online travel companies, all the ecosystem, and people were so supportive of this idea. So we kind of went off and did other things for a couple of years, and we would call each other every month and say, "Oh my God, we still haven't done Pay Later. We have to do Pay Later." And then one day actually, one of the travel agents that we were going to launch with called me up, and he was like, "If you don't do this, someone else is going to do this." It was such a good idea, and it was just one of those like now or never. So the three of us got back on a call, and we were like, "We have to do this." And the timing was brilliant because that was right at the end of 2015. Literally, a few months later, the entire India stack launched, right? So you had Nandan Nilekani, running around the world telling everybody India was going to be this digital economy. You then had demonetization happen literally, a few months later. And it was just like, the universe was telling us this was the right time and this was the thing to do.
So when was this precisely? Which
this was basically end of 2015. We did our first live transaction in beginning of Feb 2016.
Right.
And 2016, was that crazy year. It was the year Geo launched. So, suddenly 200 million people had free internet for the first time, and that has obviously scaled even more since then. And you had Diman, you had Modi running around the world talking about the digital economy.
Yep.
It was just such a brilliant time. So we do think timing is everything. We're very grateful for the tailwinds we've had over the last few years. But it's been phenomenal.
So how are you doing in terms of growth and customer growth, just wider adoption of your solutions and so on?
Yeah, no, it's been crazy, absolutely crazy. So we got lucky. I think at first we had a few really good partnerships that took off. We were also one of the first fintechs to partner with people like Amazon and Flipkart in the country, and they have these enormous customer bases that were growing at phenomenal growth rates. And we have this really cool business model that has inherent network effects. So once we acquire a merchant, we get access to their customers. The more customers we get, the more transactions we get, and the flywheel keeps turning. So once it works, it starts to scale really well. Exactly. And so it's been phenomenal. Obviously, COVID caused a little bit of a disruption for everybody.
Yes.
And we certainly had to go slow for a few months, and very slow in India. For those that don't know, we had by far the most dramatic lockdown in the world. And for 2 months, e-commerce could barely deliver unless it was toilet roll, basically. And so we obviously couldn't do much at that time. But we bounced back really quickly. And we've actually seen in the last, I'd say, 4 months, some of the most spectacular growth rates and best quality kind of business that we've ever seen in our life. Right. India, I feel like we've accelerated like another 3 years in the last 9 months.
Amazing. Right. So, I mean, you and I have a sort of the opposite story, right? I grew up in India. I moved over to to London, and I work in FinTech here. I don't actually know a lot about the FinTech ecosystem in India. And you've kind of gone the other way. We talk about London being the FinTech capital of the world. But when we do that, we don't quite realize the scale of opportunity in India. I mean, that's something that I had no idea about a couple of years ago. So, and then you see, just so many people, such growth rates, just such greenfield opportunity to build such amazing things. So what does Zest Money actually do for our customer, for our audience that doesn't know a lot of detail about you?
So the easiest way, I mean, for folks in London, the easiest way to think about Zest is we're basically Klarna mixed with Affirm for India, right? So we work with e-commerce companies. We power financing options for their customers for as little as 30 days, but all the way up to 2 years. In India, we have a huge affordability problem, as you can imagine. The average salary of one of our customers is about £250 a month. So to be able to afford the kinds of products that, we all want, iPhones and these things, affordability options are not just nice to have, they are absolutely critical for sort of the development of the digital economy. And just to put the numbers into perspective, because you said it yourself, in India today, we have about 550 million active internet users. So that's kind of 10x the UK. At least 100 million people have transacted online in the last 12 months. So that's more than double the UK. And this is the kind of the killer one, less than 30 million people have a credit card. So that's the opportunity. If you think about it, if you're an e-commerce company today targeting that 100 million shopper base, but only 30 million of them have access to credit, that's what we solve. And we think that's going to be a huge and probably an industry that's going to grow much faster than credit cards ever did, because they've not really done a great job. It's been 40 years in India, and they've still only got 30 million users. We're like,
amazing.
We can do that. We can be that.
So Amit, you've seen this story in so many different ways, right? I mean, I hear a lot about China FinTech on Twitter, and there's just people championing China all the time. I don't hear as much about India. Why is that?
You're probably not in the right circles, I would say. I mean,
I need to hang out with more Indian people.
You haven't seen my Twitter feed today.
No, I need to be on your Twitter feed. Absolutely.
I think two of the people who are like some of the biggest cheerleaders of India FinTech are there on your podcast right now. And I think there's a lot of discussion around the public goods approach that India takes. So Nandan puts it very nicely, right? He says that...
Nandan Nilekani, right.
Yeah, Nandan Nilekani. If you look at Alipay or WeChat or any of the US payment systems, they are all proprietary in nature. And while if you look at the approach that India has taken in many things, which we can discuss in further detail, it's a public goods approach where you are going after standardization and you're going after interoperability. So for example, many years back in US, there were 150 wallets that we were tracking. Even in India, before UPI came, there were a whole bunch of wallets which were there. And then if you look at it now, right, UPI has enabled this standardization.
UPI is, for our audience...
It's a unified payment interface.
Unified payment interface.
It's built by National Payment Corporation of India, which is a banking consortium. And
let's take a step back. What is the India stack, right? Let's just go through what the India stack is and what the components are.
Right. So India stack is basically 4 layers. The first layer is really the digital identity, which is a system that again Nandan, pioneered, and essentially it's biometric authentication, but it's dual mode. So it's both thumb impression as well as retina scan. And almost all the people in India have been given a biometric digital ID now.
Yeah, so this is what David Birch talks a lot about, and we can't really make work in the UK. Right? Okay.
Yeah. So that actually, as you know, right, they say in payments that if you take out authentication, it's just accounting.
Yeah, so David said, right, payments is identity plus spreadsheet, right? Yeah. Okay.
So identity problem, I think to some extent was solved through that. Then there is UPI, which is the payments layer, and it solved for a lot of use cases. People have inherently, right, their salaries coming in their bank accounts, and they have a lot of trust with the bank. So if there is a way in which you can directly transact through your bank using UPI, that was a great system. But in terms of building the end user consumer experiences, PhonePe and Google Pay and Zest Money and players like this do a much better job. So I think UPI enables that. They opened it up to the fintech companies. I mean, there was real-time payment system like the one UK and in other parts of the world, but they did not open it to fintech companies. I think that was the key difference here.
Right. So
then there are a couple of other layers, around, say, for example, there's something called DigiLocker, where you can put all your government IDs and passport and so on and so forth, and can carry it on your mobile phone. So today, if you have to take a flight at an Indian airport, you can actually show that your digital your ID inside the DigiLocker app, and you will be allowed to do. So there are things like that they build on India stack, very much like a public.
I see. Amazing. So I have a story about this, right? So when I think Salman Khan, who is a famous Bollywood actor, donated a whole bunch of money to a lot of people. And the question I was asking is, but do these guys even have a bank account? And it turns out everybody has a bank account. So this story about India building, public digital infrastructure, you could argue how well it works and where the imperfections are, but I think this whole idea of building public shared digital infrastructure that enables fintech to build great products and services is a phenomenal story. So, Lizzie, how has that, how does the India stack helped you build Zest Money? How are you using it?
Yeah, no, we use every component we can. I mean, we are just so constantly incredulous and amazed. It really is true. None of this is like myth and not reality. It's a really, really powerful piece of infrastructure that has powered so many businesses and changed so many lives. I mean, let's also just think about, what does UPI do? It means, for example, in our business, we can discern that in our business, we pay a merchant the cash, and then the customer can take the product. Now, a lot of our merchants could be small physical retailers in really, really far away towns and cities who have no access to traditional banks or finance companies in that city. Using UPI, we can get that money to them instantly, real time, for free. Right, which was completely unfeasible a couple of years ago. At the same time, we can collect the money back from our customers using UPI, which they all prefer, which is brilliant. again, for free, real time, 24/7. These are just such incredible pieces of payments infrastructure that basically reduce our costs, improve our, functionality, give our customers the best user experience you can imagine, and also have built in things like digital KYC, fraud prevention, really incredible functionality that, the sad piece is it probably restricts a bunch of business models that have made a lot of money from banks' inefficiency to build this stuff in the rest of the world. A lot of those business models don't make sense here because basically we have a kind of government and public-private initiative that has done that for us. But it really does mean speed to market and quality of product that you can deliver to customers is just, 10x what we could build in London. I'll just give one more example as well. So we're now launching right now, it's kind of in stealth, but I'll give you guys a preview. We are launching a UPI front end to our product. What that means is all of our existing customers can get a Zest UPI ID, which will be actually just their phone number at Zest Money, basically. And they can go into any store in the country which accepts UPI, which is now 12 million stores. And they can just pay like that using their mobile phone rather than needing any form factor, no digital card, no physical card, no switch, no Visa, MasterCard, taking X% in the middle. So it's a really, really, really open access, open architecture way to deliver credit to the last mile.
Well, I'm kind of disappointed that you guys are doing all this without a blockchain. Because of what I do for a living, but it's pretty amazing that all of that is actually happening.
I think you might see some interesting things coming out on that actually from NPCI. They really are ahead of the curve, and they actually have an innovation think tank, that are looking at like decentralized ways to drive further adoption of UPI. So I won't speak too soon, but don't give up hope.
I would love to hear more about it and probably make some connections there. So Amit, let's take a quick break, and then when we come back, then I'll ask you about the challenges, right? So we talked about the opportunity, but one thing I learned from working in FinTech is that nothing is ever, if something is worth it, it's usually not very easy. Right, so we'll just come back after the short break, and then we'll talk about the grind.
At timepledge.org, we are building the largest free coaching and advisory platform for entrepreneurs by providing mentorship opportunities based on pledged time. Our network of seasoned industry experts acting as coaches is working for free, pledging their valued time to the next generation of entrepreneurs who will change everything. Our portfolio of sessions goes over every skill an entrepreneur needs to successfully launch his or her startup, from how to pitch and behave with investors to how to best market your idea online, or even how to best manage your team. We have the perfect sessions with the perfect mentors. Want to learn how to become the best entrepreneur you can be, or mentor the next generation of entrepreneurs in Africa and Asia? Please visit timepledge.org and let's get you started.
Welcome back to episode 63 of Breaking Banks Europe. Today we are having a fascinating conversation with Amit Goel, who leads MEDICI Global Capital, and Lizzie Chapman, who is the CEO of Zest Money. So Amit, tell us more about the grind, the hard part of building in India over the last 10 years.
Yeah. So I think just before that, just to give you a lay of the land, there are about 2,300 plus fintech startups in the country now. And it's amazing to see that, almost half of them have come around in like the last 3-4 years. So the number of people who are actually taking up fintech as a segment to attack is great. But what some of the challenges that we have seen across the board is one is monetization, second is related to exits, right? Two of the things which are very important in the startup life cycle. I think monetization, because there are basically these 100 or 50 million people who are really sort of paying on the internet. There are a lot of people who have access to the internet, but mostly consuming free stuff. and then there is people who actually have some sort of a spending power, and that group seems to be sort of small, and the willingness to pay for, say, so for example, in India, one of the things is that people will not pay to save time, right? In developed countries, people will always pay to save time, right? They will take subscriptions and they'll take things which are going to save a lot of time. I think the time as a currency thing is not there. And
it depends on the earning power and a bunch of variables. But yes, if you do have the spending power, you tend to pay to save time. That's correct.
Right. And then, if you look at different segments within fintech, monetization problem, is especially very acute in payments because, it's either very low MDR or even zero MDR on many things. There's a huge debate in India on that. So there is that problem. But I think an even bigger problem I feel is that if you look at the US, right, there are there are secondary platforms, there is SPACs happening, there are direct primary listings happening, there are mini IPOs. Australia does mini IPOs like Lizzie was talking about. In India, we haven't seen any tech IPOs and not certainly any fintech IPOs in last so many years, right? So that means that there's no public market exit as of today. And I'm very sure, people are planning, and there will be some in the future. But as of today, if you look at the past, it's not happening. And then in terms of M&A, we actually did an analysis and it's very small, like 1% of the global fintech M&A is probably happening in India. So there are only a handful of deals which are happening. Now, somewhere, I think it also, if the founders who are working very hard for so many years, if they're not able to get exits, if they're not able to sort of monetize, then they at least need to see some liquidity during the journey, right? So then you start looking at things like a share post in the US or, a fund in Singapore, which are like secondary. So you could sell some of your, stock options or equity. But in India, it's so hard because of legal and taxation costs involved that there's no secondaries platform at scale really to be able to do that. So those are some of the...
On the flip side, right, what we are seeing in 2021 or 2020 in the US with companies with no revenue, no product, getting to public markets through SPACs, or sort of getting 100x PE multiples. That's never happened until the since the .com boom. But you're right. I think exits and a liquid functioning public market and exits are really, really important. So Lizzie, why is that? Looking at it from a founder's perspective, if that is the case, why are exits so difficult in that market?
I don't know. I'm a little bit more optimistic. I see quite a good class of companies that have been built probably in the last 3 to 4 years. So they're getting to that level of maturity now where I think we will start to see some really, really interesting exits. But I will make one point, which is a bit controversial. I don't think we yet have the investor base that we deserve. I think that when you look at particularly the US market, there are some incredibly sophisticated, not just investors, but serial entrepreneurs, especially in the fintech space, right? You've got this like PayPal mafia, and all of those guys have ended up in really, prestigious, awesome firms. And they're great mentors, board members, supporters of that next generation. I'm afraid to say we don't have fintech specialist investors, very, very few and far between in India. They tend to be generalists. And also once you go above, I'd say sort of Series B, even just the absolute number of growth investors on the ground is tiny. There's a couple of firms that are specialists at that stage. So what happens is a lot of startups end up taking strategic capital, maybe a bit earlier than necessary. Right. And I think that limits the potential that we could all be going for. I mean, there's no question this market is huge and we have the best talent in the world. I think that's also sort of accepted by most people. So there should be no limit to what could be done. But I think we need a slightly more evolved ecosystem, and that's both investors, mentors, and, and serial entrepreneurs. And they're coming. I mean, they're coming. There's people like Kunal Shah, who's on his second, unicorn, maybe decacorn soon. And he's amazing. I mean, every Saturday he meets all the young founders in Bangalore and kind of mentors them and coaches them, and it's happening, but we just probably need a few more years of that. to get to the kind of scale we deserve, I think.
Yeah, in fact, quite a few of the IIT crowd that I went to school with and worked for some of the top tier venture firms seem to be moving back to India because of the opportunity in the venture space. Now, I think what's unique about Silicon Valley is this ability to build scale, right, and really build value through not just creating products and finding product market fit, but also scaling very, very rapidly. And that's a little bit unique to the Valley. In London, we are starting to see, there are firms like Revolut and Monzo that tried a similar approach, but didn't quite work out, for startups in London. And even in AI and other tech spaces, we have seen UK firms get acquired by Silicon Valley firms. So Silicon Valley and China have that that the unique ability to blend scale firms, and I don't think the rest of the world has caught on, and hopefully will. But I get the point about mentoring as well. But India also has a lot of tech talent, right? I think, and hopefully design talent as well now. So has that? I mean, is that? Have you seen a lot of that? And I see a lot of the, when I went to college, everybody wanted to get a job and get the highest paying job. Now I see a lot of the IIT kids, what are you doing? I'm starting a company. What are you doing? I'm starting a crypto startup. So there is that, I think people have caught on to this entrepreneurial mindset. Are you seeing a lot of that? What's your
totally. Yeah, actually, and that's a really good point. I'm glad you brought that out, because that's one of the biggest changes I've seen. Honestly, even in the last 5 years, like when we were first hiring, we had to borrow, a friend's office at Microsoft and pretend that was our office, because there's no way anyone would join, a startup in a basement. People were so risk averse about the startup industry. And, people would say, I have to leave because I'm getting married and I can't possibly, tell my future in-laws that I work for a startup. That has changed 100 million% in the last 5 years. Now, working for a startup, especially in Bangalore, is probably one of the most lucrative things you could do as a graduate. It's astounding. And it's because actually we've become a global hub of talent. So we've I'm actually proud to say this. We have lost engineers at Zest Money who have gone to build AI algorithms for fintech products for Facebook, right? I mean, probably very evil, but they're that's the type of talent pool that's being created here. Some of the best firms in the world put their deepest tech and AI talent in Bangalore. So it's creating an incredible ecosystem. The quality is brilliant, but I will warn, it's definitely not the cheapest anymore.
No. I mean, at some point we're a global talent pool, right? So especially in fintech and in tech. So I quite actively invest in crypto startups in India, and I see so many great teams come out of there now. So Amit, as an investor, that's a good thing, right?
Just 2-3 points. One, it's not just limited to IITs. In fact, the latest hot thing...
I had to shill my bag. Sorry, keep going.
But even the guys who are stealing the IIT thunder right now is Bits Planning. It's becoming extremely popular. I think it's everyone.
That's good.
So I think 2 things I'm seeing. One is the size of the ambition in Indian fintechs is just mind-blowing right now. For example, obviously we have about 7 fintech unicorns now. And if you look at, a firm that I would specifically like to mention is called Zerodha. It's a bootstrap company. They did not even raise money from VCs, but they actually have about 15% of the online retail trading volumes in the country now. So they are like the largest online broker in the country.
And can I just say one amazing thing about Zerodha that I can never believe? They have an entire engineering team that's under 40 people, 40, which that's unheard of.
That's a bit like Craigslist. Right.
Seriously, it is. I mean, it's the equivalent, headcount for headcount in India, and the kind of volume and complexity of that product. I just cannot believe that. They're so incredible.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And in one of the podcasts, Nitin Kamath actually explained that how he looks at them as Avengers, or they are a very small, tight-knit team who have always worked together, and not even a single guy has left that company from that team ever since the beginning. So anyway, that's a unicorn, and just leading the market. And if you look at like companies, in different segments, like for example, there is obviously, Razorpay, which is doing amazing work in, on the payment gateway side. They have a, business bank account now, a business neobank, and they're doing so many other things. Then I am also seeing some very, very innovative things, which I have probably also not seen in like other markets. For example, there is a company called Discovery, which is like Stripe for insurance. So they have basically worked with about 11 insurance companies, and they are able to give this API for distribution, which anybody can use. So for example, InMobi is using it on the Android Glance app on the Android to sell insurance, and they don't need to do Discovery takes care of all the complexity in the background. So the kind of stuff which is happening, some of these things are so innovative. It's amazing. I mean, as an early stage investor, I feel very good about the kind of company that I see.
Amazing. So when will we see, or maybe there is already one, like an Indian fintech startup create something that captures a lot of customers or value outside of India as well?
Oh, there are many examples, right? So obviously, I'll not go back to UPI, because UPI is becoming like this thing which every country is adopting. But
of course, we all want it.
Right. Let's talk about SME digitization, right? So there are a couple of companies like Khatabook and a few others who started this whole SME digitization wave, and now there are companies like DotPay which are creating like these digital stores for Kirana stores. And that wave has now caught up in Indonesia, in Africa, in different parts of the world, and using that playbook that Khatabook and these guys created.
Amazing. So, Lizzie, Zest Money has similar opportunities outside India, right? I mean, it seems like your product has customers all over the world potentially. So, is there an opportunity there? And we talked about blitz scaling as a fintech startup based in India. Does that thought cross your mind?
Absolutely, yeah. No, we really want to prove that you can build some of the best in class technology for the world from India. I mean, it's a no-brainer, because we see smaller competitors to us in other countries in the region desperately trying to hire in Bangalore, and we're like, we've got all the best people, we're here. And it really, I think talent is the biggest limiting factor in any blitz scaling successful business. So we're just so happy with our team. We have such an incredible team. We have such a great kind of energy and momentum and brand and reputation now that we feel we should use that. Let's really double down. So this year, we will definitely launch in one new market, and we've been studying the region, and we find some markets that are really, really, really interesting, where the young digital consumer is incredibly similar to the Indian version. So, markets like the Philippines, where you've seen this huge explosion in their kind of digital economy, and, young aspirational customers who have exactly the same challenges, but, dreams and aspirations as our customers. And, banks who are really desperate to build digital products, but just don't have the DNA and the wherewithal. And just to mention our model, and I think this is another interesting thing about the India market, our model is very FinTech, 2.0 or 3.0. We believe in collaboration with banks. We don't think we're going to kill banks. We think that's very FinTech 1.0. Let's beat the bank. Banks are not going to die quickly. Regulators will not allow that. Our grandparents' life savings are too important to them. And so we believe that the way to blitz scale is actually to enable and empower banks.
Find
and if you do that, exactly. Let's use their might on the balance sheet and regulatory side. We'll bring our might on the technology side, and together we can do beautiful things. And that works really well in lots of other regions, like Vietnam, even Thailand. You've got actually pretty good and very well entrenched banks, but they don't necessarily have the digital DNA that we can provide. So
I've never seen that before in the UK, by the way. All our banks are great at building technology. Okay, I was joking. So...
Hello, I'm still a customer.
Anyway, so we are breaking banks Europe, so I have to ask, what sort of bridges have you seen between the European or the UK? And I mean, I still miss Europe after Brexit, and hopefully we will somehow remain part of Europe, even though we say that or not. But where are the bridges between these ecosystems, right? How does a European fintech enthusiast, product person, investor, find a channel to access the Indian ecosystem and sort of contribute or participate?
I think they have to follow Amit on MEDICI. That's the obvious answer.
I can give you a few examples. I don't know if it's happening at a very big scale, but I can give you 2 or 3 examples. One is that, say, for example, the European neobanking investors who caught up with the first wave of sort of neobanks in the world, which were in UK and other parts of Europe, they are investing in the Indian neobanks. So that is one thing that I have seen. Second is that there is a program between the UK government and the Indian government, especially from a technology council perspective, and they are doing a lot of this exchange of ideas and knowledge. The startups are visiting and to see if there's a market in India, and subsequently there's a market in UK for Indian startups. So there's a little bit of work I've seen, but I somewhere I've also seen that if you apply the 80-20 principle, it's very hard to globalize fintech outside of certain segments, like say remittance, and remittance is by nature, you have to be sort of global.
Yeah.
But otherwise, it's not that easy because the regulations and the workflows, the processes, people,
customer preferences, cultural elements. There are quite a few things. Now, I don't know. I mean, if you're in Silicon Valley, then you don't tend to worry about all this, right? You have $1 billion in capital. You are Facebook or something, and you create a product, and then you just sell it to the rest of the world, right? For the rest of us, if you're in the UK or Europe or India, it's likely to, even China, right? Then it's really difficult. Then you can't really. It's very, very hard to create a product that finds global scale, that finds global adoption, and so on, unless you're in the valley. So except in my world. In crypto, right? I mean, it doesn't matter where you're from. I mean, I know so many teams, Matic Network came out of India, and they've been very successful. They're hiring people from all over the world right now, some of the best Ethereum people I know. So I think there are some which are so far so early that some of those things don't apply, but I think you're right. In the mainstream, there is still that scaling issue or sort of globalization challenge, and especially now.
But I was going to say that I think a lot of US fintech companies and particularly infrastructure builders. So, there's some really incredible fraud software providers in the US that, we would love to explore their product in India. Mm-hmm. None of them take India seriously enough. They see it as a far too small revenue market that they just ignore it. And I mean, even people like PayPal have basically got India wrong, not really invested in it properly. So I would say actually UK fintech in certain segments should think of India as an interesting market. So it's a long game, but there are going to be some very interesting breakout stories, and you're not going to have the usual global competition that you have everywhere else, right? Meaning, if you're like a neobank from London, the minute you go outside of the UK, you're bombarded with overfunded Silicon Valley companies. That's not true in India. And we've seen that. So there's a few breakout. There's a company called Onfido, which is one of the leading KYC providers in India, and we're the KYC gurus in India. I can tell you that you have to KYC anything. To buy a pint of milk, you need to KYC yourself. So it's amazing that this UK company has done such a good job of breaking into the market, but they have, and I think that's a really good example. So I do think more UK fintechs should think about India as a
right, and there are so many cultural bridges, shared language, shared history. There's quite a bit there. Now, when I was younger, we used to have incubators, accelerators, and all those types of things. What's going on with those during COVID? Do we still have them out there?
Not many, I would say.
So, Nectorious, our friend from Startup Bootcamp, started something in Mumbai back in the day. Is that still going on?
I remember that. What was that called?
I don't think it's around anymore, I think.
No.
So what sort of catalysts are there in India's fintech ecosystem if you're starting a company? How do you sort of get the support, mentoring, access to...
One thing I'm really, really impressed is that there is this amazingly growing ecosystem of angel investors, which are of 2-3 different types. One is people like, say, Lizzie and Kunal Shah, and people who are already building large-scale fintech companies and, might want to invest. And there is CTOs and CXOs of larger companies who have formed these angel syndicates and they are doing this stuff. And then the third is like people who are maybe in the middle management, but they use AngelList and other platforms to sort of invest and put small checks. But that number of angel investors and the number of angel checks which are being written in the ecosystem right now is just mind-blowing.
Yeah, I've written a few of those myself in crypto, so I know that part of the ecosystem very well. And it's been a phenomenal story in the last 3-4 years, right? India didn't get into Bitcoin mining. I mean, electricity wasn't quite the same. India missed out on the crypto boom even until 2015 when Ethereum was being launched. And now I see just so many quality startups coming out. And I see the same in AI, where I spend quite a bit of time as well. Lots of great people from big firms like Facebook and Google and Nutanix and so on, starting their own products and so on. So overall, a phenomenal opportunity right now. In terms of closing remarks, so I think we're close to the time. I could do this all day. We have so much to talk about. But for a European resident, right, someone who is living in the continent or in the UK, how do I go about learning more about India's fintech ecosystem? What are the best sources? And this is a bit of a low-hanging one for you, Amit. And how do I participate in that ecosystem and sort of benefit from it?
Yeah, I'll jump right into it. You should go to GoMedici.com and see all the content and research and everything. But I think one area where actually, people who have worked in European neobanks or open banking and, stuff like that, they have a great opportunity in India right now because, I was just moderating a panel discussion for Sehmati, which has set up this whole account aggregation framework in India. And there are about 6 or 7 banks who are already financial information providers who are live. There are 6 or 7, companies which have got either in principle or the full license of account aggregator. And then there is a whole host of financial information user companies, lending companies who are also integrating and using this. So I have seen people like, I don't know if you know Lars Merkel, who has worked.
Yes, he's a good friend, right?
Yeah. So he is participating very actively because the experience and what you have learned there, building stuff in open banking can actually be utilized now as we are going into that. And by the way, India's account aggregation framework is phenomenal, right? It's not just open payments, it's actually open finance. So we are talking about pension funds, insurance, investment accounts, banking accounts, all of that, right? Being available, the aggregate data being available.
Wait. So that's just wrong. We've been talking about open banking for so long around here. You guys should not have done it before us. But
We have. We've leapfrogged again.
Well, there is something for us to learn there. And Lizzie, how do we learn more about Zest Money and the work you're doing in India's?
The other thing I'd say about the India ecosystem, and this is why I love being here so much, is people are so open and there's absolutely zero ego. So you can literally contact anyone, including like Nanda Nilekani on Twitter or LinkedIn, and they will reply and they will meet you, and they will to Amit's point about no one will pay to save time. People are weirdly generous with their time. Time is such a generous commodity in India, and so take advantage of that. I cannot tell you some of the most amazing people that I've had dialogues with. It's so easy and it's so doable. Twitter's really, really active, and now like Substack. So just follow us and follow a bunch of people we follow and get involved in the conversation. And now is a great time. There's a bunch of like conferences going on all the time, and everybody wants to learn from especially London, actually, especially when it comes to neobanks. So I'm sure if you get plugged in, you'll get all sorts of conference invites to come and talk about neobanks, because we're all fascinated by what's happening over there. So yeah, please follow me.
Awesome. Last question. What's the best way to find you on the internet?
Me, I would say probably Twitter, at Chapman Lizzie.
Thank you. And Amit?
Also Twitter, Amit Twitter.
Amit Twitter? Amit, is it Amit _ Twitter?
No, it's just Amit Twitter.
Amit Twitter. Okay, great. Thank you so much, Amit and Lizzie. This was, I truly really enjoyed this conversation, and I need to book my tickets to India and really hang out with the doers in FinTech. I think there is something for me there. And I'm sure there is something there for, all of our listeners in Europe and in the UK. What an exciting time to be in this space. Thank you so much for joining us, and hope to see you again on one of our shows in the future.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Breaking Banks Europe, a Provoke Media podcast in cooperation with FinTech Stage. Don't forget to tweet us out, shout out, or post to the team at Breaking Banks EU on Twitter. If there's something or someone you'd like to hear on our cast, let us know. See you next week on Breaking Banks Europe.